Hi and welcome to this video. Now, I'm going to go back in time here now. I'm just on the outskirts of Blackpool, a place called Marton actually, and it's about caravan factories. Now, in my area we had a few manufacturers. There was Fleetwind Caravans just outside of Frettleton, a few miles down the road. There was Somerdale Caravans at Thornton Cleveley's, and there was Dovedale Caravans, which became Pemberton Caravans, here where I am today on Mitcham Road. Now, the last time this was actually produced, Caravans, was in 1980, so that's over 43 years ago. But the factory, although now it's had extensions on over the years, etc., it's still sort of recognisable, because in 1974, in about February, I came down here with my dad, and he's Austin 1800, to apply for an interview. Well, I got an interview to start working as an apprentice, and this was Pemberton Caravans. Now that over there, it's obviously another company now, was the offices, and I remember going through that door. You can see that white door there. Going through that white door and up those stairs and talking to the works manager. So you just see the white door. Basically, this bit here wasn't here. This was open. All this was their storage compound, and the actual factory itself was over at the back there. Now you can't see it, unfortunately, but it was like a big style Nissan hut. I tried to see it before on the other side, but I can't, it's obscured. But that was the original factory from which Dovedale Caravans were built, and Pemberton took it over and quite literally stopped producing Dovedales and started producing Pembertons from here. But they only made the small ones, like the Sunflower, from here. Now, about 78, 79, no, I'll go back a bit sooner, 77 way, Knowsley Caravans, who were at Wigan, were tourer manufacturers, and what happened then was they went to liquidation in 76. Now, Knowsley'd always had a good reputation for building caravans, and Pemberton thought this was an idea to get into the tourer market, although Pemberton had produced tourers in the past. They'd never really done it seriously. What they did, they bought the Knowsley name and redesigned the range. Now, they were not the most fantastic looking caravans at all. I'm going to show you a picture now of one. See what I mean? They were a little bit bland, but they used the old names like Santo and Hermes and Juno, that sort of thing. And they built the tourers here, because some years later I was I just bought a house where I am now, and I was talking to a guy down the road. He was he was a sheet metal worker, and he told me he used to work here in 1980 when it shut down, making touring caravans, because he'd bought a Bessica touring caravan at that time, and he said he'd actually worked here at the factory. So this is really the most you can see, which is this office block here at the front. And as I say, that used to say Dovedale Caravans on their Mitcham Road. They still used the name Dovedale, even though it was Pemberton, but they made Pemberton Caravans. A bit confusing. But yeah, I can't see at all across the other side, but it's like a big Nissan hut there. I tried to see before and I can't see anything. But so it brings back a few memories. It's amazing how, even on the industrial estate, things change, new buildings go up and all that sort of thing. But I can remember coming down here on this particular day. It was a bit of a wet day, and Dad parking here and the caravans coming out on the transport. I was getting very excited, because what I wanted to do, I wanted to end up designing them. That's what I wanted to do, although tech drawing, as they called it then, was not one of my top subjects. So yeah, so this bit here is part of the original bit of the factory. The offices and the actual, main factories over at the back there. But you know, we did have our own caravan manufacturers in this area, and this is where I had my heart set on. And so what happened, he's saying? Well, in July 1974 I got a letter from Dovedale, and it told me that they no longer could employ me. because there was a downturn. Of course, if you read the book Caravan in the 1970s on Amberley Publishing, that's out now, it tells you about in 73 how things started to take a bit of a slide, and by 74 a lot of manufacturers were struggling as VAT and in high inflation and petrol prices had gone up, and caravan prices were obviously going up too, a bit like now. And they decided to cut back, and they decided not to take any apprentices on, and also to actually fire some of their own workers. It did pick up a bit after that, but I never got the chance to get ever there again. And ironically, I went to work for a toy importer for many years, and we actually moved from where we were at Polton and Bispen. We actually moved just literally about 500 yards down the road from here, so I virtually came round full circle. But no, I never got a chance to actually work here at Dovedale Caravans. I knew a lot of the apprentices, because I used to do day release from school. I used to do day release in those days, to like tech, and I did coach building, which was how they used to build caravans in those days. And we were with the people from Dovedale Caravans, or Pemberton, and also Duple Coaches. It was a big coach manufacturer here back in the day in Blackpool. Anyway, I shall look at some more, and I'll put a few pictures up of the vans that they produced here. I've no actual shots of the factory, unfortunately. I wish I had. But anyway, this is just one of the factories. My next one will be Somerdale Caravans. They were made at Thornton. They finished around about 1967. But I'll see you on the next video. Chap there looking very strange what I'm doing. Right, speak to you again. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for watching. Right, actually, just to butt back in on that again, actually, I've just been talking to a guy here who owns a business here, Enigma Jim, and he knows the guy who owns all this building. And he said to me, he says, look, he says, if you, sorry, there's something coming through there, he says, if you come again, he says, have a chat, he says, and I'm sure he'll be able to take you around the back and be able to see the where the factory was. And he may have a bit of information, I don't know, but yeah, I'm sure I can see just the roof of it, but I presume it's still there. I thought I could see the roof. It was like a big Nissan hut type thing. And funnily enough, actually, some years ago, we have a guy who used to come and do a lot of paint and decorating for us, and he got one of the guys he had worked for him every now and again was retired, and he got talking to him, and he said, he saw the caravan. He said, I used to work for a caravan factory. And I went, oh yeah, who was that? He went, Dovedale Caravans, on Mitcham Road, near Blackpool. And I went, wow, I was going to work there. Told him the story. And he says, yeah, he says, I worked there, he says, for a good number of years in the 50s, he said, when it was the, Ron Mitchell had it as Dovedale, he said, before Pemberton bought it. Let's get out that sun, because it must be coming across. And basically, he said, what he used to do was, he said, we used to have good works dues, he said, at Christmas, and he says, and at the Earl's Court show, he says, we all used to have a coach trip down to London, he says, to go and see the vans on the stand. And he said, we had some really good times, he said, and he worked there, I think, up until the sort of late 60s, and I think he then went on to go as a painter and decorator, but for a while, for a good few years, he worked there in the late 50s into the early 60s when Pemberton bought it. And he said he wasn't quite ever the same after that, because Ron Mitchell then sort of retired. I suppose he'd gone away with a few quid in his back pocket and decided enough was enough. So that was quite interesting. There was another caravan company as well called Colonial, and for our local newspaper some years ago now, I did a little bit of a feature in the local newspaper on where that factory was. And again, I spoke to one or two people who had worked there many years ago. I spoke to people about 30 years ago, this particular woman, and she remembered the fire that they had and how that they could have actually moved some of the caravans, but they decided to leave some of them in. So I think that was a bit of possibly an insurance job. She worked in the lacquer department on French polishing, as they did in those days. It was proper furniture finish, and that's where the fire had begun. So I'll do that one as well, colonial caravans, and also another one, Skyline. Skyline were made where, if anybody knows about sports cars, TVR sports cars, Skyline were made where TVR sports car factory was. I mean, most of that's gone now, unfortunately, when TVR shut down years ago. And Colonial, the guy who robbed that, who actually owned that, was called Bob Greenhouse, and his brother Brian, I can't remember, it was Brian that owned Colonial Skyline, but the two of them, they were sort of not exactly direct competition with each other, but they decided to join up, and they moved down to the Lytham St Anne's factory, and produced Skylines there, and also Colonials, and gosh, that's quite a rich history, because yeah, the company went bust and he restarted up again, and it was making Taurus, but I'll do more of a history on that. It's just if people are interested, because because Hull is always the area that we go to, and where lots of caravans were built, but around this area in North Lancashire, Blackpool on the coast, we had several manufacturers. Okay, they were never major successes, but then again, they did have the good sort of good years where their vans were pretty popular. Then, like a lot of things, isn't it? Sometimes you say, I remember such thing, there used to be loads of them, but you never see them now, and I wonder what happened to the company, I wonder what happened to the brand, and that's how it was in the caravan industry. And I find it really intriguing, and hopefully you will too, if I get it across right to you.